and we want to welcome Mark and Claire, who are with us. Great joy to have them, and great friends of mine and of great friends of CCI Worldwide. So it's really good to sort of hear what he's been up to and to share with us. And we gave Mark a specific subject, which is becoming an effective shepherd to those we lead in 2022 and beyond. Now, I've done that because he actually does have sheep. And I think, Claire, aren't you an official shepherdess?
I'm not sure if I'm official or not, but I do look after some sheep.
Yeah, you clean them up, yeah. And we're very grateful you gave us some fleeces, because my wife is starting to try and do get a spinning wheel going. We haven't managed to do it yet, but some lovely Jacobs. Aren't they Jacobs sheep? Is that right?
They're Hebridean.
Ah, Hebridean. There you go. All right. Well, I don't know what I'm talking about. One sheep looks the same as any other to me, but hand over to you, Mark and Claire, and we're going to have a bit of a presentation, some info, and then we'll have some questions later on. Let me just pray for you as we start. Laura, thank you for Mark and Claire being with us. Thank you for our friendship over many years, and Mark and Claire's investment in CCI Worldwide and those of us on the screen. And we thank you for the opportunity to hear from them today. Amen. Over to you.
Amen. Well, thank you very much indeed, Norman, for that warm welcome. It's really very strange. It feels almost like someone hit pause button 2 years ago on a whole host of things. 2 years ago, I was just preparing to head off to Moscow to join Alexander on the CCI Russia conference. And that was my last trip for CCI. And I remember sitting at Heathrow. No, we flew from, I can't remember, Gatwick, I think it was. And I remember sitting there and someone saying there's this thing called coronavirus around, and you really ought to buy some hand gel to put on your hands because you just never know what you're going to pick up at an airport. I remember buying some at the airport, and we got to Russia and we did the conference with Alexander in Russia, and then came back. And little did we know that was pretty well the last trip that we ran from CCI Worldwide globally. And then not long after that, I moved on to new challenges, and Norman took over from me and left this wonderful sort of family that we're a part of. And once you're a part of it, you never leave it. And it's just really so special to come back. And Claire and I are just blown away. You'll see above my head here, the CCI clocks are still there with the time zone. So, and the map of the world is still here. So you're still very much in our hearts. And it feels like yesterday looking at faces around the screen, Mazai there, and you know, when we ran the virtual global gathering, people like Mazai at absolutely every single possible meeting we could hold at any single time of the day and night. Jenny is, I don't know what time it is in the morning for you, Jenny. It's probably 4 a.m. or something. So that sort of commitment is just extraordinary. And CCI is a wonderful, wonderful family. And I think having now come out of it for a couple of years and being able to just see what's happening and follow it on social media and stuff, you just realize quite how wonderful a group it is. It's something you can't really put in a bottle and describe. It's just an incredible family, a connection, an association of like-minded people. And you can go literally anywhere in the world and you meet up with camp people and you've got a huge bond straight away. It's just wonderful. So it's a privilege to be asked to do this, and thank you very much. Just thought, before I dive into the leadership and shepherding stuff that we're going to unpack a little bit today, I thought it might be useful just to give you a little bit of a flavour of what we've done since. So Claire was obviously working with me and Vicky, and Norman and Jenny with CCI. And Claire, do you want to say a little bit about what you've gone on to do?
Right, so I now work in a primary school. So I work in a class of 7-year-olds, and I work with a little boy who needs some extra help. So I'm enjoying that. It's very busy, but it's really good.
Thank you. And many of you remember Kez and Jake, our two youngest. Kez is now at university. She's in her final year at university, reading geography, and looking to possibly do a master's next year. And then Jacob, our youngest, is he's just started university and he's reading maths and is doing a 4-year course on maths. So he's settling into that next stage of life. So at the moment we are empty nesters, which is a really weird feeling. If you've had kids and then you suddenly don't have kids at home, it's a very strange feeling. And there is a freedom to it, because you can suddenly, you're not taxis for kids everywhere and you can do what you like when you like, but there's also a gap that's left. And we have a full household with the 5 kids and now 6 grandkids coming and going, and having them not here is a bit of a, so we're getting used to this next season of life. So when I finished at CCI, I took over running a health trust here in the UK. So went from one extreme of leadership of working with a very close-knit, very capable team of 3 or 4 of us to now running a large organization with 1,300 people in it. So we've got a big team providing health and well-being across the area where I live, all very local. Obviously been hugely impacted by COVID. So we have a number of hospitals and we have a lot of nursing staff who are having to treat people in pretty desperate situations. It has been. We seem to be coming out of it here now in the UK, which we thank God for. But I know other parts of the world are just going into that dip, and we do feel for you, and we do really continue to lift our brothers and sisters around the world to the Lord for just healing out of this terrible disease. 3 years ago today, myself and Norman and Vicky and Claire were in Spain at the Spain CCI conference. And we had the opportunity to share then about what was happening in Europe and in Spain, a tough situation, which is only an hour's flight from here in the UK, but a real contrast of how CCI is blossoming in some parts of the world and in some parts of the world really struggling. And I'm conscious around this screen here today that some people will be absolutely really super encouraged and thinking about how we're coming out of COVID, we can run camps, we can really start to exercise our leadership. But there'll be others of you who are on this screen now or who are watching this after on YouTube who will be thinking, wow, this is tough still, really tough. And we're having some real strong leadership challenges. And I just hope over the next few minutes that what I share with you around shepherding and leadership is something that's of help and encouragement to you. I don't come as the font of all knowledge at all, and just present some ideas and some discussion things humbly to you. And my prayer is that there'll be something in there that you think actually that's really useful or encouraging or challenging, or something that will actually be able to unpack and take back into the whatever situation that you are serving in around the world. So let me dive into and you'll lose. So I'm going to screen share so the pictures of you get smaller, so I can't really see much of you, but I'll yes. So like, Bruce is waving. Yeah, okay. So hang in there. But if you need to shoot, absolutely, totally get that. My prop is my shepherd's crook here, which we use, and that is I'll talk about the flock in a bit, but you won't see it because you won't see me much. So I'm going to show you the prop now. And one other thing I'm going to show you as well is a book called The Way of the Shepherd, which is a great book. And if you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. And a lot of the stuff, the material I'm talking through today comes from that, written by a guy called Kevin Lehman. And I can put it in the chat if you want to know more about it. But one of the best leadership management books that I've read by a Christian in recent years, and Rob Ribby at Honey Rock recommended it to me, and it's fantastic, so I'd highly recommend that. Right, let me and if there's any questions at any point, if you put it in the chat, I won't be able to see them while we're going, I'm afraid, because of the way this tech works, but I'll pick them up at the end, and then I think Norman's going to lead us in any sort of discussion that people want to unpack anything that comes from this. So the leader and the shepherd, that's what we're looking to get into today, and drawing some parallels between us as leaders. And I'll talk about us collectively as leaders, because whether you're leading a Bible study group of students, or whether you're leading a multinational organization, whether you're leading a big camp with hundreds of staff, or whether you're leading a small operation with just a handful, we are still all leaders around this call today in some capacity. And we're just going to see what we can learn from how a shepherd leads his or her sheep. And I guess we do that from our perspective of our sheep. So we have sheep here, and as Norman alluded to at the beginning, we have a flock of 18 Hebridean sheep. Now that's the sheep. I took a picture of them in the autumn last year. For those in America, that's the fall. We had these young lambs were born from their mums. And the reason we chose Hebridean sheep were because they are some of the toughest sheep you can get in the UK. They are happy generally to birth alone. They come from the north of Scotland, and Christine will be familiar to having seen lots of Hebrideans in Scotland, coming from Scotland. But they're a tough breed, a bit like the Scots actually. And they're used to living on mountains and in rocky places and in tough places. And they don't need an awful lot of looking after, if I'm honest with you. So we chose them. They've also got horns, which can be they can be not aggressive, but they can be quite forceful. When you go in with a bucket of food, they will come at you to try and get their mouths in the first one's in the bucket. And their horns can be quite painful when they knock you on the elbow, which Claire has on a regular basis. But the horns can also be incredibly useful because you can grab them, they act like handles. And when you need to move a sheep or do something with it, those horns are incredibly useful. So you can see on the little one there, that lamb is probably just a few days old. You can see even still there, the buds of its horns are starting to appear. So some of the stories that I'm going to talk about are about our flock of Hebridean sheep. They are incredibly cute animals. And when you see lambs, they look just wonderful, don't they? They just stare at you with their sort of baleful eyes and look very attractive and very beguiling. But they are some of the most irritating and awkward and difficult animals that God created. I couldn't find it, unfortunately, but I saw a picture recently of someone who described 3 forms of fencing for animals. And the first form of fencing for horses is just sort of a simple fence post with a bar across it that will generally keep a horse in.
Here's what I found.
Oops. And then a simple, for cows, very simple bit of wire or one strand of electric fence will keep them at bay. For sheep, the picture was of you can imagine a sort of a prisoner of war camp with towers and guards and electric fencing and rows of barbed wire to make sure they can't escape. And that is literally what you do need for sheep. They will find the tiniest gap, the smallest opportunity to escape, and then they will wreck things. They are incredibly, they are real escape artists. And that reminded me of our Bible verse for today, which is, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned everyone to his own way, from Isaiah 53 verse 6. And when you've kept sheep, as we have over the last 5 or 6 years, or when you've seen sheep, and you realize quite how much their cute little exterior belies underneath this real desperation to escape and cause trouble and mayhem, you realize that as we as individuals, as created man and women from God, we are, the analogy in the Bible, like sheep who have gone astray. And we do turn to our own way. And I know in my own life, and Claire and I know in our own lives, how easy it is to move away from the Bible, from the book that we have been given as our guide for life, and how easy it is to stray from what we should be doing. And that also applies in a leadership context. When you're leading a team, so often it can feel like you're leading a flock of sheep, and that flock needs attention, because it's very easy for that flock to begin to stray or to begin to go into places it shouldn't go to. So that's what we're going to be unpacking today. I've done the welcome introductions. We're going to look at 5 different aspects of the shepherd and the leader. First of all, knowing the condition of your flock. Secondly, knowing the shape of your sheep. Thirdly, helping the sheep know you. Fourthly, making your pasture a safe place. Fifthly, using your staff to direct and correct. And then finally, just sort of to wrap up, there's just a few thoughts about the leader and the shepherd. And I've just got one or two slides on each of those, and then we'll break and then have an opportunity to pick up any people's comments or suggestions on that. So let's dive into this then. So knowing the condition of your flock. Well, I think one of the key things is that we know as, and I say we, Claire, I primarily talk about Claire as the shepherd. She's the shepherdess, but I'll use the we here, if that's right there. One of the things you know is that every sheep is different and has different needs and has different requirements and has different challenges. And one of the things that the shepherd does is gets to know them. You know which is the sheep who will come and always put their head in the bucket, number six, who will always put their head in the bucket to try and be the first to get the food because they're the greedy one. You will know the sheep who always hangs back a little bit because they're still a little bit scared of you, even after years of knowing you, because they want to make sure you're not out to try and trap them in some way. And that's exactly the same as when we're in a leadership situation. It's very easy to look at a team or a group of individuals and to view them as a collective and to treat them all the same. But actually, each of those people who we lead as leaders is different and has different challenges, has come from a different place and may have had different things happen to them. It's very clear to us when we come up the drive if the sheep have had anyone interfere with them at all. Even if the postman has stopped and just leant over the fence and looked at them and they're not used to him, they will be behaving differently. But we know that some will be more affected by that than others. And it's just important as leaders that we invest in our team as individuals as well as the collective. And then one of the things that we have to do as shepherds is meet our sheep regularly. You see sheep on hills and you think maybe they haven't been seen for weeks. Well, the general wisdom for a shepherd is to see their sheep once or twice a day, actually, to really check in with them. And one of the things that Claire does to enable them for her to just to check they're okay is to go and feed them in the morning and feed them in the evening. They don't need it, but actually in doing so, she's engaging with them. And again, as leaders, it's just so important that we engage with our sheep, our teams, the people that we lead on a regular basis, that we don't assume all is well. And then actually, in a matter of days or weeks, or sometimes months, things can get very bad very quickly. We've known other shepherds who we know locally who have not perhaps engaged with their sheep on a regular basis, and something's maybe got stuck in their foot and it's begun to get septic and maggots, and then suddenly the sheep is gone from being a very healthy situation to actually being a very unhealthy situation. And that can so easily happen with the people that we lead unless we're engaging with them on a regular basis and identifying those areas of concern. We had a sheep here literally last week who we'd had all the hedges cut down the drive. We had a tractor in and all the hedges had been cut, and there's lots of hawthorns with big thorns on them, and a lot of them had fallen into the sheep field, and one of the sheep had stood on it and it had gone right into its hoof and it was starting to hobble. The first day Claire said, well, I'm not sure if that one's okay or not, but we'll leave it. The next day it could hardly walk, and if we hadn't done anything that day, the following day the sheep would have died. But so actually to be able to deal with things quickly, identifying areas of concern and sort it is exactly the same with us in a leadership situation. If your team are unsettled in some way or there is a thorn in their flesh, let's help us to identify it and let's work on how we can relieve that pain, and we can sort the whatever the issue is in their lives. And I think the last thing in this one about the condition of our flock is appreciating that they are unsettled by things that are of no worry to us. So when we're leading a team, it's very easy to assume that the team are running or working or operating at the same pace that we're operating at. But generally they're not. And one of the challenges that we have as leaders is to bring certainty out of uncertainty. There's so much uncertainty, and people worry and are concerned, and they look around in the environment they're operating in, and they look to their leader as the sheep look to Claire and myself. And one of the things that we do as shepherds is just bring that certainty. There are very clear boundaries, there's very clear rhythms, there's very clear routines, there's very clear systems of when things happen. And exactly the same when we're leading a group of people, that people can be very unsettled by things that we think, well, why on earth are you worried about that? It's not something you need to be concerned about, but actually it does concern them. So know the condition of your flock, invest in it, invest the time in it, and that will help you and myself and us as leaders as we grow closer to becoming the most effective leadership that we can operate, that we can have. So that's the first one. So as I say, all we like sheep have gone astray. This is the lambs last autumn, absolutely running around like a group of naughty. This was mostly boys this year. We had 9 born last year, and most of them are boys. And boys are incredibly much more naughty than girls. Now, and that's not the case in normal life, of course. But here, our boys were a real mischievous bunch. And it was like having a lot of teenagers here, wasn't it? They were literally going astray at every possible opportunity. So we need to know, secondly, the shape of our sheep. And this is part of this is when you build a team, it's just worth just exploring that a little bit, because the shape of the sheep, the choice of sheep you make can make the task easier or harder. So I said at the beginning that we chose to have Hebridean sheep, and we chose them for 2 reasons. One was their horns, because you got a handle to hold them, and secondly was because they're tough. And we are away a lot, and we're traveling, and we don't want to necessarily have to be going to do stuff with the sheep that requires lots of intervention and washing and foot changing and worming and fly striking and everything on a regular basis. So we deliberately chose very, very hardy sheep. As a result, the wool, for example, is worthless, other than to Norman, who loves to do something with it. We could have bought a sheep where South Down, for example, where the fleece are worth $70, $80, $90 a fleece, but we'd have had to have done a huge amount of work with them, and that would have become our life, looking after our sheep. So in the same way, when you're building a team, just think about the sort of people that you want in your team, about the fit that they will have, because it's all very well choosing an individual or a person who is perhaps very, very capable, but maybe very, very high maintenance, incredibly hard work to manage and to lead, or perhaps geographically it's not going to work particularly well, or there's some reason why the fit isn't particularly good. And I would encourage you to be ruthless about picking someone based on their character and their competence. John Macaulay talks about a lot of that on the Global Leadership Program: character, competence, and cadence. And I think those 3 things are so important. And I quote that in team meetings on almost a daily basis. Look for people with the right character, with the right cadence, so running at the right speed, and the right competency. It's not just all about competency. And in exactly the same way as how we choose our sheep. And start with healthy sheep. It's a no-brainer, really, but there are a lot of sheep out there for sale in markets that have got issues, have got challenges, have got problems. And in the same way, when we're building our teams, let's start with the best possible place you can do. Start with team members who are able to contribute in the best possible way right from the off, rather than necessarily, unless you're deliberately going down a development route, which is a completely different thing. But if you're building a team where you want to be operating from day one in a very good way, start with healthy team members. And then there's a little thing there on the shape of your sheep. So what are their strengths? So we think this could apply to sheep, but particularly here to people. What are their strengths? So when you're pulling your team together or you're appointing, what are their strengths? What's their heart? And that for me is so important. What's their motivation, I guess? Why are they doing this? What's their attitude? you can have incredibly capable people with a you know, very engaging personality, but their attitude is, it just, sometimes it can stink. You can think, why you really want to be part of this? Personality, what's the makeup of their person underneath it, and their behaviors, and then finally, what's their experiences? What have they got that's going to be bringing to the situation, that's going to help and enable you to achieve as the shepherd, as the leader. There's an example there of the sheep. You can see some of their horns there a little bit. There's some of the mums here. They've just been shorn here. This was last July, and I'd cut down some beech hedging and had given them some beech to just to keep them friendly and give them something a bit different to grass to eat. And it's all about helping your sheep to know you. I think if someone had maybe given them some leaves like this who didn't know them, they'd have been a lot more cautious. But because we've invested time in them, our sheep know us. And it's important, thirdly, that our sheep do know us as leaders. This model of building trust is so important. I lead a lot of workshops now in the health sector. And one of the things that comes through again and again and again is the importance of building trust, both within the team in which you're operating and those who you serve. And in the Christian camping arena, it's exactly the same. How can we build trust with the teams in which we're operating, and in those people who we serve through our camps and through our various programs that we run? And that model of consistency, compassion, and integrity is so important, that we are consistent in what we do and how we approach a particular issue or a particular person, that compassion that comes through, as Jesus showed compassion again and again, comes through, and that we show integrity, we show honesty, we show that reliability that people can then build trust upon. And trust is not given, trust is earned. When we set high standards as leaders, we're personal, not just professional. It's very easy as a leader, isn't it, to be thinking, well, I'm the leader of this organization, I'm the leader of this situation, but have no personal touch to it. And that EQ, that emotional quotient, similar to an IQ. You can have very intelligent people with a great IQ and be very professional, but have no empathy and no emotional connection with their team members. And that's just so important, that personal bit. And in the same way, the shepherd, it's very easy for a professional shepherd just to be going in and to be counting the sheep and feeding the sheep and have no sort of relationship with them. But actually, when I see Claire out with the sheep, she has a personal relationship with those sheep. She knows each one. She can tell of the 18 immediately if any of them are suffering, or if any of them are in pain, or if any of them there is some sort of issue. And it's that personal link with them. And just remember, so each of our sheep in the UK, I don't know if it's the same overseas, has to have a tag, has to have a mark in their ear, one in each ear actually, depending on what sort of where they are in the cycle. And that tag is logged and has to go up to our government Department of Farming, wherever it is, what's it called? Yeah. DEFRA, the Department of Education, anyway, one of our government departments. And that somebody could turn up from the government and they would be able to take a barcode reader and they would know immediately whose sheep that was. They would know that sheep was Claire Heasman's sheep. And they bear that tag in their ears. And in the same way, though we don't take our team members and tag them, because that would be a bit odd, they do bear our mark. They do bear our tag. They are part of Dale's team. They are part of Bruce's team. They're part of Craig's team. They're part of Dave Cairns' team. They are part of your team. So they will be bearing your mark, whether you like it or not. And you as a leader, and us as a leader, will be we will have had an influence on them in terms of where they're at, in the way they approach their role or their responsibilities. And it's just important that there is that personal link between us and those individuals. so we're having some building work at the moment done at home, and we're having some topsoil moved around, and this is just an example of how the sheep naturally come from Scotland. So we live in the flattest part of the country here in Essex, so we have no hills at all. It's very dull, I'm afraid, Bruce. You'd be very disappointed. But so we had created our own hill here, and our sheep immediately then felt at home. They're suddenly on their little crags, and we're running up and down, and you can just see some of the flock there exploring as they go up and down. But we could have done that in a place which would have been dangerous, because they could have fallen into, there's some fencing there, and there's other areas, there's a road next door, and it could have been in doubt, but that's in a very safe place. And it's just important as shepherds, as leaders, that we make our pasture, and if you don't know what a pasture is, it's almost like the place where the sheep graze. We make our pasture a safe place. So one of the responsibilities as shepherds is that you look for where trouble could come from. You know, when the lambs are very small, they could be taken by foxes, they could be attacked by badgers, they can be even taken by a buzzard. A buzzard could come in and take them from the air. So you have to be thinking, where do I need to protect my sheep from, my lambs from? And that's exactly the same as us as leaders, isn't it? We need to be thinking, where's the flock? Our flock could be an incredibly good place, but where is danger going to come from? Is it going to come from temptation on the internet? Is it going to come from the travel, the challenges and trials of traveling? Is it going to come from overworking? Is it going to come from lack of sleep? Is it going to come from relationships? Is it going to come from lack of money? Is it going to come from a whole host of other things that can attack our flock? And as leaders, it's our responsibility to be thinking ahead and thinking, right, okay, these are some challenges here. What can I do to protect my flock from those challenges, particularly in a Christian camping context, where there's often some very, very close-knit relationships are formed, and we almost form ourselves into a bubble that can be, we can feel it's impenetrable, but actually can be attacked. And when there's trouble in there, can be a real problem. Every position within that team is important. And in the same in the flock, you have the leaders of the flock, you have the followers in the flock, you have the mums, you have the dads. Every position is important. But in making your pasture a safe place, and happy to unpack this later if this is something you want to get into, sometimes there will be people in our teams who do not really fit very well, either because they don't want to be part of the flock or because they're causing constant trouble. And when we started our flock a few years ago, there was one of the sheep there just did not fit in and was constantly causing aggravation with the other members of the flock. And we actually had to get rid of them. We had to take them away and give them to another flock. And I think as leaders, sometimes we have to make those difficult calls. It's sometimes we can think as Christians and as Christian leaders, we need to just deal with everybody and make it work. Well, that's the ideal, but we have also to be brave and make the calls. Sometimes it's not going to work. Sometimes we do have to move people on. Sometimes people are not fitting in well with the flock and need to be moved on to a new pasture with a different shepherd. And then the last couple of areas under this section is about staying visible with the sheep. And I guess that comes back to the point about at the beginning, being someone who they recognize and know, and not allowing problems to grow, dealing with them an early doors. This was a lamb who was born literally, it's probably half an hour old, maybe 20 minutes old last year. And you can I love this picture because of the mum's eyes, actually, just staring at me, thinking, what are you going to do? And the story behind this lamb is that this is actually the second of twins. This is the second lamb to come out of the mum. And if we hadn't been there to take the first lamb out, who had died in the lamb, then both the mum and this lamb would never have survived. And it's one of those situations which is really tough, and we had to take the first lamb out, and Claire was incredibly brave then. And then we thought this mother lamb here, with the one with the big eyes, was going to die actually. And then another lamb came out, and it was this little one here, and it survived. And actually, it's running around outside now. And if I had a mobile camera, I could take you out and you could see it. But it's extraordinary how by keeping that personal relationship with the sheep and understanding them and caring for them, we're able to save the lives of these two. And it's exactly the same situation when you're a team leader. Sometimes you can despair and think, this team's had it, or this individual's had it. But actually, sometimes with the right intervention, and maybe removing someone from the team or making a change, you can actually bring new life into the team, as we did with that lamb there. So the last area then, I showed at the beginning my staff, and this is perhaps the harder side of shepherding, because shepherding isn't all just about being all warm and cuddly and cozy, but actually being prepared to take the necessary actions to direct and correct if needed. Obviously, we use persuasion rather than coercion if we can, and we give clear boundaries and we give freedom within those, and the sheep know that within that field they can do what they like. But if they get out of the field, they will be in trouble very quickly. But when they do get into trouble, we have to get them out. And in the same way, when your team and our teams get into trouble and there are challenges with them, we need to look at how we can either protect them, stand in the gap and fight for them from the foxes that will attack, correct them, and inspect them, listen to them. Because the shepherd knows her flock. And in the same way that Claire knows her flock here, as she was feeding them recently, and as in the same way that Jesus knows us as the good shepherd, so we as leaders need to know our flocks from all the different aspects of their life. So great leadership is a lifestyle, not a technique. I think there are so many leadership books, and I have probably most of them here in my study. But actually, when it boils down to it, it's a lifestyle. It's the way you act, the way you live your life. It's not a technique. It's not a series of rules or check boxes. And it does require constant attention and learning by the shepherd. Us as shepherds think a team is in a good place, the flock's in a good place, but actually it can go like that. And we as shepherds have a heart for our sheep, and we learn from the good shepherd. And the good shepherd says, I am the good shepherd, I know my own, and my own know me. And I think that's a great place to leave our thoughts about shepherding and leadership. And I hope there's been some opportunities to just draw some parallels there between us. And I'm going to now hand over to Norman to give any other reflections that we've got. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Mark and Claire. And it was brilliant to have that sort of practical examples of shepherding. You know, when Jesus taught, he used the examples around him of shepherds and real situations. And perhaps for many of us, we're not familiar with having sheep. Some of us are, but it sort of brings home all those points as you use like a parable, those illustrations. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's great to have you in amongst us again. We've got some time now to have a bit of a discussion, or people to share other points. I haven't picked up any questions in the chat particularly, so I'll just sort of kick off on one thing which I thought was quite interesting. You talked about how the sheep and how our team members can become unsettled by things that don't bother us at all. I was just wondering whether anybody also picked up on that, and whether anyone had anything to share on that, and why would that be? Because as leaders, we're often very gung-ho about things, and why isn't the rest of the team following? So what might be some of the examples of that you've seen or could imagine? Oh yes, Christine, yes.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I wonder whether in some cases, there's an issue about the kind of work rate, our cadence, if you like, that may create issues for people who work with us, in the sense that there may be an expectation that everybody should be working at the pace that we set, so to speak. And there'll be I hadn't come across that cadence notion before, Mark, and that's very helpful. Just the kind of rate at which people work and operate. Is that am I getting the right? Is that what you said? And I'm just wondering whether that's an issue sometimes that causes unsettledness and maybe uncertainty in terms of expectation that people might have. I don't know what you think about that, Mark.
Definitely. I think by the nature of it, as we naturally get into leadership positions, you're generally there because you're capable of getting things done, and you operate at a certain pace. And but not everyone is a leader. There are more vast trunks of people who are quite happy to follow and don't particularly want to get into leadership positions. And I think one of the dangers that we have as leaders is we don't think of ourselves as anything special. I'm sure I'm sure we all don't think of ourselves as anything special, but we are all leaders here today. And by default, we will therefore be perhaps just jumping a little bit ahead with stuff. And we're not just thinking about tomorrow, we're thinking about next week, or instead of next week, we're thinking about next month. And so therefore we're stretching out, but actually the tail behind us can get quite long, particularly if the organization is geographically spread or is quite large, so that that sort of flow of information can get left behind quite quickly. And I've been in meetings where I'm talking about stuff thinking, oh, everyone's got this. We talked about this months ago. And then someone will say, well, I didn't realize that. I'm only just about catching up with this. And it's getting that. So the cadence word, which is sort of speed, is making sure that we have the speed right for the organization as leaders. Because if we run at the wrong speed and the organization is running at a different speed, then that's a recipe for friction.
We had a very good session yesterday, Emerging Leaders, with Chris from Australia, and we were talking about performance orientation. As our goal is performance, and the impact that has on the way we work and the way we relate to other people, whereas other people perhaps don't have quite the same capacity or perhaps orientation to perform and achieve at a high level, in which case we can alienate or isolate people if they feel that they can't kind of join with you in that. Anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I think for this carries a wide range of pieces, but for many leaders, I think that by the DNA of a leader, like Mark mentioned, you're out there, you're the people getting things done. Part of that is also leaders tend to be the ones that are willing to try the new journey, explore the unknown. They don't care, they're reckless, they have all of these tendencies to be that. And I think it's important for us to, and when you mentioned that line before on this topic, I was smirking because years ago, I realized that for me, this was an exciting thing for me, all of the unknown. But for most of the rest of my team, they were nervous. They were very scared. So being aware that most of your people, maybe 90% of your people, you have to be very careful with your conversations. And for me, even just dreaming and sitting with a team of people and dreaming and just spouting off things, just at coffee, at lunch, at wherever. I've shipwrecked many people over the years without knowing it, and finding out later that these people were just devastated with my conversation. In my world, it was fun, it was exciting, it was the future, and for them, it had just swamped them. And so for us to just be aware of the fact that that group of people, finding that group of people in your organization that you can actually dream with and go there with, you can have these safe conversations with, but the rest of the people, which is probably 90%, maybe even higher, the rest of the people, they really need your help to get along this journey, because they're scared. They don't know what to do. And for you, it's not a big deal, but for them, it's a big problem. So yeah, I learned that years and years ago, and I was shocked, because I was thinking this isn't a big deal, but for the rest of them, it was a real catastrophe and a real problem. And it made, until I knew that, it created a whole pile of roadblocks, all hidden, all these undercurrenty things that you're wondering why your idea, whatever you're pushing forward isn't moving. And then suddenly you find out that these people just are completely paralyzed because they're afraid of it. So yeah, that's a very valid situation.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. That's great. It's a great comment.
As Dale was talking, one of the things that I've recognized as a leader is just it's that significance of our voice, where we don't realize the weight that our positional leadership role carries. And so one of the things you were just mentioning, Dale, and I'm like, absolutely, I've had those conversations where staff have been blindsided or they've been derailed because of it's more than what either they can comprehend, or they're taking my brainstorming as a directive. And so I've actually, in conversations with staff, have developed the language that my voice has 3 different weights. This is a suggestion. This is you're responsible. It's just a suggestion. Some brainstorming. The second one is this is a recommendation. Still your decision. Still your ownership. But I've been around for a while. I've got some ideas. I think there's some value behind it. And then the last one, which I rarely use, is this is a directive, where this is now I'm going to live into my positional authority. And I think so to help some of those, to keep staff as we're communicating and sharing as a leader what we're doing, I think to know and understand and recognize the authority that our voice carries is significant to keep in mind.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps that leads us on to another point, which was the interesting one about the sheep bear our mark. Now, yeah, we don't all have tags in our ears, but that aspect of influence, it's slightly perhaps scary as the leader to think that those we lead are going to in some way model us. And that puts a level of responsibility on us, and that actually our leadership sets the tone and the culture of the way that the team relates. So any thoughts on that from anyone? Is that a true statement that Marcus is suggesting there, that those we lead will in some way mirror the leaders?
Well, it kind of echoes Paul's words, doesn't it? Follow my example as I follow that of Christ. So there's a sense in which both we and those we lead should have the mark of Christ on us, but people will pick up on our leadership and take on things from how we do things and who we are, I think. But what that made me think there, we don't tag people's ears, but there's that idea in the Old Testament about the pierced ear of the servant, who's willingly submitted to the slavery of in a slave culture, but to the ownership of the person who owns them. And I don't know if you remember the old song "Pierce My Ear." Do you know that worship song?
I remember.
Yeah. So there's maybe that kind of idea that we're all crying out to the Lord about, that we will carry the mark of Christ and having surrendered to his leadership. But if people are working with us, then you kind of expect there'd be aspects of how and what we do that one would hope would be, as we follow the example of Christ, that the people are following our example. Unfortunately, sometimes there are things that we're doing that are off beam and people pick up on them as well, which is part of the challenge, isn't it?
I think it's cumulative as well, actually. Well, a couple of thoughts. One is I think it's cumulative. So So I think back over my career, and I've probably had, I don't know, a dozen or more, 15 different leaders. And actually the mark in my ear now is a cumulative mark, because it's sort of been, I've got tags all around both ears from the different leaders who, I've got one of them sitting on the call here, Bruce. And so I've got my Bruce tag in here. And actually some of those tags are really, really valuable. And you think, goodness me, that's really given me some good insights about how to lead in those situations. And I'm not just saying this to blow smoke, Bruce, but I would put you in that camp. Extraordinary leader, and I've loved working with you. And then there are others, and I think other tags in my ears of people who I've had as my leaders, and I think I've probably learned more about how not to lead from you than how to lead, because actually I would never want to be approached or led in that way. So that actually it's still a learning for me. It's still a mark on me, because I've learned from you, but I've learned how not to do things as well as how to do things. So I think it adds up, which is why when my youngest kids are sort of thinking about going into work, and they're right at this early stage of their journey. And I say to them, those first few leaders you have will be hugely influential, because they'll be the first few tags in your ears of leadership, and they will be the founding ones. And learn from them, and learn good stuff and bad stuff, because when you're in that position, as you will be, God willing, in years to come, and you're leading teams, be thinking back on how you were led when you started your career. So I'm sure many people can sort of echo that.
Perhaps we can talk a little bit about the issue of a safe place. It sort of these thoughts kind of link together, that if you have like Dale said, and Dave was saying, that if you come in and sort of start talking about dreams and ideas which panic people, then people begin to get afraid and nervous and insecure. So what are some of the ways that we can actually create a safe space which helps people to flourish and be valued, and accept that failure is okay? I mean, how can we create those sort of environments? Or what have you seen as good practice, or not such good practice, perhaps?
If I could say something on that, I think one of the areas that I've learned is that I'm a perfectionist, and I've had to lower my perfectionism, because I found out that when I'm a perfectionist, other people around also think they have to be perfect, and I'm not, and they aren't. And so by not necessarily lowering my standards, but by allowing myself to fail, and allowing others around me to see how I respond when I fail, and hopefully showing grace even to myself, I think other people feel that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to try new things and learn from them and grow, but not necessarily succeed first time. But that started with me being willing not to be perfect. And when I started out, I remember, I was always the first person in the office. I was the last person to go. And I realized that in a certain way, I was actually modeling an unhealthy lifestyle, rather than, what I thought was just showing the good work ethic, right? But sometimes we have to, I think what we model is what helps people to be able to do that as well.
Any other thoughts on that? I think what Craig illustrated there is a classic sort of performance orientation, where it's all about what we deliver, what we can achieve, and in some cases that pressure and some roles and tasks are very much performance oriented, and if people don't deliver on time, they feel they're failing, which is unacceptable, and that can create great insecurities.
We have a few questions in the
good.
chat.
Oh, excellent. Well done. Let's pick those up.
So Raf has asked a couple of questions.
Great.
So the first one is, what are the things you look out for in the strength of a sheep or flock?
We have to think about how we can draw the analogy, but from the point of view of the sheep, you're looking for good teeth. So I don't think when you recruit, you're necessarily going to be looking at people's teeth, but you're looking for good teeth. You're looking for good feet as well. I guess the analogy is it's looking for a healthy team member. You're looking for people who have a balance, can contribute on a balanced way, rather than just perhaps in one particular area. So yeah, I guess that's probably the analogy.
So another one also from Rafa was, well, Rafa, are you still here somewhere? Yeah, perhaps you could ask your second one.
Okay, so the second question has to do with you have a shepherd, a sheep, a sheep who you have discipled or you have mentored for so many years, and you get to a place he sees that you are not useful again, and perhaps he has seen or she has seen another person who feels he want to move to that person. In that case, what do you do?
I would say it comes down to the motivation. Why do they want to move? If it's for good reasons, for career development, for service, fresh service, for reinvigorating, to be freshly motivated, then I would never stand in the way of anybody who wants to move. I had 2 people today at work resign, moving into moving from my organization, want to work to work for New Shepherds. And do you know what? They've been here 12 years and they're going for good reasons, and I welcomed it and said that's fantastic. But equally, people can leave for the wrong reasons. They can leave for reasons that perhaps they think are good, but actually we have a term in the UK, I don't know if you understand this, when people say the grass isn't always greener the other side of the fence. So people think, oh, the grass is greener in that, working for that shepherd, and it's going to be nicer grass, but actually when they get there, it's the same grass. And it's not necessarily greener, and people can go back in their careers and go back in their opportunities by moving from one shepherd area to another. So I'd always go back to what's the motivation behind why they're going to go. But if it's good, I'd never ever stand in their way. I'd say it's good. And the other thing is, sheep go, it gives an opportunity for new sheep to come in, and actually that's not a bad thing either, because sometimes a flock in shepherd terms can become quite stale. It becomes a little bit samey. So bringing some new blood in can be good. And in the same way, in a team which we're leading, bringing some new people in can actually bring in a whole raft of new ideas, a whole freshness. It can change the dynamic in a way that brings it it encourages everybody to up their game a little bit, and can be a really positive thing. So generally, I'd say it's a good thing. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and then we've got another question from Ruth. Ruth, I don't know if you can hear me. Do you want to ask your question to Mark?
Yeah, how do you make a decision when you know that there's someone on the team who could really benefit and from being on the camp staff, because they need that sense of community and people to encourage them, but at the same time they may require counseling themselves, how do I let that person be a leader and be healed on the team? Like, how do you make a decision in that case?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Ruth. Really good question. And I guess that's part of the role that we have as leaders, is that we don't always take the finished article. We don't always bring a group of people together and they're suddenly a high-performing team. That's generally not going to happen. And whilst, you know, we've been talking about, you pick your sheep carefully and you build your flock with precision, even still, they're not all going to be perfect. They're going to need some development, and some will need more than others. And there may be people who you're looking to bring into the team who have particular skills or attributes or experiences that you really, really need in that team, but who have other big chunks of what their makeup is, where there's some gaps and some development. And you may make a decision as a leader to say, on balance, I think they're going to bring more to the team, even though I'm going to have to invest in them. And then it's just a question of putting together, rather than just hoping that they'll improve and get to a situation where they'll get better and they'll fit in, or they'll sort out their issues. Actually, it's investing in them, identifying, so what are the areas where there are issues, whether it be, well, the whole range of possibilities, isn't there? And actually identifying it and then putting a plan in place which says, this is how we're going to tackle it over this time frame. And then I probably would put in a check and a balance, maybe in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, that we really want to have seen some progress in how these issues are dealt with and how these issues are resolved. And if they aren't resolved, we may need then to make a decision about, is that fit right? So you're giving them an opportunity to make the changes, and you're helping to put some interventions in to make it happen, but you are putting a break point in, and you're being transparent about that up front. I hope, does that help, Ruth?
Yep, Mark. Yeah, thank you so much.
That's fine.
Great. Okay, I think we've covered those questions. That's great. Okay, I'd just like to say another huge thank you to Mark and Claire, and it's been as I sort of stepped into the shoes of Mark, which were much bigger than my normal feet, it's been a great joy to follow on and continue the initiatives that Mark started, and also to keep in touch along the way. And it's really good to have you back with us again. So it's really excellent. And it's good to see so many of you on the call I haven't seen for a while, and God bless you all. Thanks very much, everyone. And that's it. Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Claire.